So it is of somewhat shame that I have never actually seen all of the Mission Impossible movies. So in this video, bit by bit, I'm going to be giving my thoughts on the Mission Impossible movies as I watch them. It'll be sort of a video diary type of video. So without further ado, let's begin. So the first Mission Impossible film was released in 1996 and was directed by Brian De Palma, and I found the film quite good. I really like the action set pieces. I thought the action in the film was absolutely spectacular, which is to be expected from really any Tom Cruise movie. He is known for being in action movies, and the action set pieces and the sequences are very well directed, very well shot, and they're very tense and exciting. Most notably, the train sequence towards the end of the movie. On a physical, real-world basis, it probably didn't make any kind of sense for a train to get into a train tunnel. Maybe that's happened sometime in history, it probably has. I don't care, it's an amazing sequence, and actually, the visual effects in this film generally have aged remarkably well. This is a film that you've got to remember is 22 years old, so it has aged really well. I was also expecting this film to be quite crap. I mean, that's not to say it isn't, but I was expecting it to be a little bit, rubbish, because it's the first film in the series. I was expecting some of the iconic Mission Impossible isms to not appear for a few films later. But it actually turns out that Mission Impossible is clearly identifiable as the stereotypical Mission Impossible movie, at least. It's got the absolutely amazing music, it's iconic, everybody knows it. I knew about it before, despite never actually, seeing a Mission Impossible movie. It is a delight to the ears. In fact, they don't actually play the Mission Impossible music that often. They kind of let you wait to really hear it. They only play it, I think, 2 or 3 times in the whole film, and it's a delight every time you hear it. Another surprise for me watching this movie was the tone. I actually thought this movie would be surprisingly light in tone. I thought it would be, a bit of a silly sort of spy romp, akin to a Roger Moore Bond film, perhaps. But no, it's actually surprisingly dark. That's not to say it's completely devoid of humour. It's not. In fact, the humour that is in the film is quite good. But there isn't really enough humour. Now, of course, you don't have to put humour in every single film ever made, ever. Some films work with humour, some films don't. But I think this film really could have worked with just a few more little bits of humour. Now, I'm not saying change the tone completely and make it a goofy romp, but they could have just added a few more little small jokes or some fun ad-libbing, stuff like that. And also, I think the plot kind of got away from me. I kind of understood it. It's about Ethan Hunt sort of being on the run, kind of, and his mission goes wrong in Prague and all his team members are killed, which I liked that bit. But every time there was a dialogue scene, I kind of switched off. It didn't really work for me. I understood what was going on, but I kind of found the action sequences were amazing, but there weren't enough of them. There weren't enough action sequences where I thought, this is exciting, this is tense, and this is brilliant. The dialogue scenes were just kind of bland, and that's it. The film itself is wonderfully shot. Brian De Palma has a great eye for sort of cinematography. There isn't actually that much shaky cam. There's great POV, great use of perspective, great lighting. It's a great film in terms of the look of it. The plot really is a bit wibbly, it's a bit odd. And I don't really fault the movie for this. I think if it's the first film in a long-running franchise, you're allowed for the first film to have a few errors. It's the first film. You have room later on for improvement. So I expect the films later on will be a lot better. But yeah, the plot was kind of a bit iffy. But the action sequences were amazing. And of course, I cannot talk about Mission Impossible without talking about probably the most iconic scene in the whole franchise, and probably one of the most iconic scenes in all of the spy genre, and that is the whole vault sequence where Ethan Hunt, is lowered down into this room where he steals some data from the computer or whatever was going on. I don't really care what was going on. It was so exciting. It was so tense. It was just brilliant. It had some cool little bits of humour as well. It was really, really good. I can't really articulate it perfectly, but it was really, really good. What about Tom Cruise, the lead? Well, I thought Tom Cruise was surprisingly charismatic in the role of Ethan Hunt. There are a few early scenes where he's a bit wooden, but really during the Prague sequence, his performance is basically good from Prague onwards. I think before Prague, he's a bit wooden and a bit of a non-entity in the film, really. But once he is the only member of his team left alive, or so he thought, he's great. I think a problem I have with Tom Cruise is that I can never view Tom Cruise's character. So Mission Impossible, I couldn't see Ethan Hunt. I could see Tom Cruise. Whilst when I'm watching maybe a James Bond movie, I can see James Bond and not Daniel Craig or whatever. Here, I'm seeing too much of Tom Cruise and not enough of Ethan Hunt. So I don't know if anyone else has this problem, but I certainly do. Overall, this movie was pretty exciting. It's well paced. It's well shot. The action is really good. It's a pretty decent opening film to this franchise. So I'll be interested to see what the future installments of this franchise hold. So I now have watched Mission Impossible 2, and I actually liked it a lot more than the first Mission Impossible. And for some reason, I have a feeling this is going to be a controversial opinion. I don't know why, but I think that Mission Impossible 2 might not be the most well regarded of the Mission Impossible movies. I don't, I don't know. I really like Mission Impossible 2. I thought it was a really exciting movie, a fun movie. One thing I would like to start out with the whole Mission Impossible 2 thing is how good the fight choreography in this movie is. Now, the fight choreography in the first Mission Impossible was good, but in this movie, the fight choreography is, I don't know, it's just more brutal. The fights between Ethan Hunt and Sean Ambrose, the fight, towards the end, is really, really good. It's brutal, it's physical, it's great. And there's no like stunt double stuff. I mean, I know there's the whole thing like Tom Cruise. Do you know Tom Cruise does his own stunts? But I don't care about that. This film was exciting, and I think number one for a film is if you enjoy the film and you found it entertaining. That's the main thing, right? You can look at stuff like plot holes and character inconsistencies later on, but if you personally enjoyed the film, that's the main, crux. That's the main point to focus on. Dougray Scott as Sean Ambrose, a really great villain. Very intimidating screen presence, sort of like a slimy villain. Big improvement on the previous film's villain. Really just brilliant. Brendan Gleeson's great in the film. Thandie Newton's great in the film. Just a really great cast, and John Woo has a different sort of directorial style, if you will, to the first Mission Impossible movie, whose director has I've just completely forgotten who directed that, but this film Brian De Palma, I think that's it. This film looks better than the first Mission Impossible. The cinematography is better. It's a newer film, so the visual effects look better. But that's just a given, so, whatever. Visual effects are quite sparingly used. The action sequences are very exciting. There's, several great motorbike chases, which are very exciting. Brilliant. This film has problems. I think a problem I have is that Sean Ambrose might not be the most fleshed out of the characters in the film. He's not very interesting. You don't really maybe learn much about him, but great performance. You really hate him by the end of the film. You really want him to suffer and die in a brilliant. You're supposed to hate villains, and Dougray Scott, really great actor, and pulled it off really. And Tom Cruise, I think, has a more confident performance in this film. He's slightly settled into the role of Ethan Hunt a bit more. This film did come out 4 years after the first Mission Impossible, and there isn't. It doesn't feel like it's set several. It still feels in the same universe. There hasn't been a big sort of tonal shift necessarily. It still feels part of that same world as the first Mission Impossible. It's not like, I don't know. It's not like a reboot, or it's still. I can't really explain it, but sometimes you get films which have been made several years after the original, and for some reason they feel completely different. This doesn't. Yes, directorially speaking, and the cinematography is very different, but it doesn't tonally. It's still very much the same or broadly the same as the first Mission Impossible. And obviously, the musical score by Hans Zimmer is brilliant. It's Hans Zimmer. Need I go on? I suppose the film never really takes a breath, I suppose. There aren't many moments where I think that there needs to be a scene next where, that the characters just sat down talking. And even if there is, it's a lot more exciting. I was a lot more engaged in the dialogue scenes in this film than in the first film. The first film, I kind of switched off during dialogue scenes. They kind of bored me a little bit. And obviously when it got to the action, it was all exciting. But this film is exciting during the action scenes and the dialogue scenes. Now, I've only watched this film once, so who knows how this film will hold up on rewatches. But at the moment, it won't, I can almost guarantee it won't be my favourite Mission Impossible film when I finished. But at the moment it is my favourite, which is a bit of a stupid thing to say given how I've only seen, the first two. It was, I think the budget was around about 125 million. It shows on screen. The film looks fantastic. The opening sort of aeroplane sort of crash, hijacking, whatever, really cool. I suppose surprisingly bleak start to the film. I thought it'd be like a fun little action romp thing with Tom Cruise, and then the film proper would start. Not really. It's quite a sort of serious beginning to the film, and it's interesting. And this film did come out in 2000, and it doesn't. I suppose Mission Impossible came out in 1996, and that feels very much like a 1996 movie. Mission Impossible 2 doesn't. It's aged a lot better than Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible 2 feels much. It just has aged better. The whole plot about the virus or whatever it was, that kind of was a bit goofy and a bit, whatever. But I don't care. It was cool. I liked this film. And, so long as you like a film, I think you can focus on plot intricacies and stuff like that later on. And yeah, there aren't many complexities of the character. Thandie Newton's character starts off as quite a confident character, and then sort of towards the end, when she sort of gets poisoned or whatever happens, she's sort of a damsel in distress and kind of loses her, the best aspects of her character there. But the film was good. It was really well paced. It was a lot, the pacing was a lot better than in the first Mission Impossible. It looked a lot better. The performances were a lot better. The story is, yes, it's a bit goofy, but I understood it a lot more than the first one. This isn't a cinematic masterpiece. It's definitely got problems, but they aren't glaring problems. I wasn't watching the film and thought, oh man, why are you doing that, Ethan? Or what's going on? Or, that didn't happen when I was watching the film. I could just watch the film and enjoy it for what it was. Maybe as the weeks pass by, or, as whatever, my views on Mission Impossible 2 will evolve, as they probably will. But at the moment, I feel, that Mission Impossible 2 was a pretty good film. So there we are, really. I think maybe an issue is I haven't really got much to talk about the actual intricacies of the story and specific scenes and things. But yeah, I really enjoyed Mission Impossible 2. So maybe, I'm kind of expecting there to be a bit of a dud film coming out. Maybe Mission Impossible 3 will be a bit lousy. I don't know. I hope not, obviously. But I think in a 6-film series, there must be one that's a bit shit. But, we'll see, obviously. So now we get to Mission Impossible 3, and I liked Mission Impossible 2 and I liked Mission Impossible 1, but both those films felt kind of disposable. As soon as I'd watched the films and enjoyed them, and done the recording for this, obviously, I kind of forgot about them. Mission Impossible 3, again, I only watched it, not that long ago, and, it's still very much active in my mind, but I have a feeling that I'm not going to forget about Mission Impossible 3, because Mission Impossible 3 was probably the first one that felt like an actual movie. The first two Mission Impossible movies felt a little bit disposable. Movies that you can kind of watch, just, a quiet evening in, just watch let's watch one of the first two Mission Impossibles, and that's it. There's not much, at stake for the characters in those films, especially the first one. Kind of the first. Anyway, the third one's kind of interesting because you watch the third one and then you look I was thinking back to particularly the first one. I was thinking the first one just looks so pedestrian compared to this one. This one has everything's better in the third one compared to the second one. The cinematography's better, the acting's better, the plot's better, the villain's better, the action sequences are better. Everything's better, and it's not even slightly better. It's a lot better. And I believe Mission Impossible 3 was the directorial debut of J.J. Abrams, who's doing quite well for himself these days, and it's really well shot. And I've realised now I've seen every J.J. Abrams directed movie, and JJ never makes a boring movie. He knows he can get characters to do things, and even if it's a dialogue scene, there's a running around or there'll be something happening. It won't just be standing and talking. There'll be something going on. For a good example would be Star Trek 2009, where there's a few expository scenes, but they never diminish the story. And here J.J. Abrams does a fantastic job. It's kind of interesting how this film came out 6 years after Mission Impossible 2, and yet the wait, obviously, the wait may have been irritating for Mission Impossible fans at the time, but it was probably worth it. But let's talk about the cast. You have Philip Seymour Hoffman being just a brilliant villain. He really captured this sense of I'm evil kind of thing. And I suppose the villains aren't, again, there isn't much of a three-dimensional aspect to the villain. None of the villains have been particularly three-dimensional, but I just, you really hate this guy's guts so much. And he doesn't actually look like he's maybe much of a fighter against Tom Cruise. Completely different build and height and everything like that, and age, I think. But anyway, the fight, they have against each other, sort of towards the end of the movie is really, really good. Tom Cruise has a wife now, and I can't remember the wife's name, which is a bit unfortunate, but that was a bit of a surprise for me. I just never thought Ethan Hunt would actually settle down and get married, but he does, and it adds an emotional weight to the film that probably the previous two films, were pretty lacking in somewhat. This film's also a lot more better. It's just, I'm trying to think, you have the first Mission Impossible appearance of Simon Pegg playing Benji. He's not actually in the film a great deal, but he contributes a lot while he's, the few scenes he's in. He's great. And obviously his character's quite good. And I know, for one thing, he is in all subsequent Mission Impossible movies, which is nice. Tom Cruise is obviously great. It's hard to really explain Mission Impossible 3. But, again, if someone was saying to me, I'm getting into Mission Impossible, or I just want to watch some of the Mission Impossible movies, which ones would you recommend? At the moment, I'd say just skip the first two and watch Mission Impossible 3. Go straight to that one. So far, the movies don't seem particularly linked together. There's not much linking them beyond the fact that there's some cast members linking through all the others, but even then, very few. That's it. The films are very self-contained, and as a result, you can watch Mission Impossible 3 without having ever seen the first two Mission Impossibles. You could argue those first two Mission Impossibles are now deemed irrelevant to the series, because now Ethan Hunt has a wife, and he didn't have a wife before, and the wife lives at the end of the film, so presumably she appears in future installments. So there is an emotional weight now. Really good film. I don't know. I think it is my favourite Mission Impossible film. I don't know if I'll, every time I do one of these little snippets of what I thought of the Mission Impossible movie I've just watched, if I'll say if it's my favourite or not. Maybe I'll just stop now and mention it back again. I don't know. I'll probably contradict myself with the next one, whatever. But at the moment, Mission Impossible 3 is my favourite by a mile. If I were to rank it out of 10, I'd probably give it an 8 or 9. I don't know, that kind of level. Not quite a 10, but really very good. And no, it hasn't redefined cinema or anything like that. It hasn't reshaped the wheel, or anything like that. But it's very good. And that's kind of it. There are 6 films in this series. I've watched 3, and now there are 3 more to go. So now we get to Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, the 4th Mission Impossible film and the first Mission Impossible film to be subtitled. This film was really great. I really enjoyed it. One point I would like to make about Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol is that the comedy included in the film is really good. It's not, a comedic film itself, but whenever there's a joke, it's better. It flows better, and I think one of the reasons for this is firstly, obviously, the script and the punchy dialogue and everything like that, but also Simon Pegg as Benji. Benji was obviously introduced in Mission Impossible 3, but he's a lot more present in this film. He's only in a few scenes in Mission Impossible 3. Here, he's effectively the tech character, and as a result, Luther is, not really in this film. He's in one scene right at the end, and that's it. So I really like Simon Pegg as Benji. I think Benji is almost, it was almost, it was something that was missing that I didn't realise Mission Impossible needed, and that was a bit more comedy. Again, this film isn't a funny, it's not like a comedy necessarily, but it has lovely little jokes that are included every now and then, and they just work. Jeremy Renner as William Brandt, he's great. He's a really great addition to the cast. Obviously, Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt is great. The cast is great. It's probably the most polished and just best overall cast to date in Mission Impossible. We have obviously Léa Seydoux as sort of Sabine, the sort of assassin character, and I haven't actually talked about James Bond, the rival spy franchise, too much, but Léa Seydoux's character in Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol is a better character than her Spectre character, Madeleine Swan. Obviously, in Spectre, she's playing a good person, and here she's playing a villain, but just a better character. Obviously, I'm not going to compare every aspect, but obviously, this is the first Mission Impossible film where I've noticed someone who's also been in a Bond film. There may have been others in previous Mission Impossible films, but in this one, I've noticed it, and there we are. That's just a little thing. Plot was pretty good. I like the sort of cinematography of it all. I think Brad Bird. I think this was the first live action film Brad Bird did, and it really, it's a really good film. I like the whole section stuff in the Kremlin. I suppose this film hasn't really revolutionised Mission Impossible for me. It hasn't, changed the perspective, but I think it's I think what's interesting here with Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol is because it's the first one with a subtitle, I can now sort of speculate and I can say stuff like, what does Ghost Protocol mean? Whilst before, obviously, it was just Mission Impossible 2, and then Mission Impossible 3. It wasn't the most sort of inventive titles. Now, obviously, it's Ghost Protocol. What does Ghost Protocol mean? We now know, but I like the addition of the subtitle, which they've carried through, obviously, with Rogue Nation and others. Where was it? Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, Fallout. Yeah, and they've all got subtitles. And I suspect all subsequent ones will have a subtitle. And it just adds a layer of sort of mystery and speculation when you haven't seen the film, you don't know the details of the plot. You're like, oh, what does this mean? It's cool. The action was very nice. They went to several countries in Ghost Protocol, and I'd have to say my favourite bit of it was when they were in Dubai. I think that was really good. I also like the final sort of section in India. Does this film feel any, is it a shift from the first three? Any of the first three? No. I think at the moment this film is on par with Mission Impossible 3, in my opinion. And then, of course, plot-wise, we get to the fact that initially it's believed that Ethan Hunt's wife, Julia, is dead, and that's why she doesn't appear. But it turns out that she is alive. She's at large. She even appears right at the end, but she can't have anything to do with Ethan Hunt. Otherwise, because she'll be killed. Because of Ethan's job and whatever. That's interesting. During the early stage of the film, when it's believed that she is killed, and you don't know yet the true nature of what's happened, I was thinking, why introduce that character in Mission Impossible 3 if you're just going to not use her here? But obviously, that's not the case. So that's an interesting detail, and she'll probably appear in subsequent movies. And I think this movie was probably one of the most confidently made films. It feels very like a very slick production. I haven't got much to really, add, really. The stunt work's very good. The action sequences are very good. The dialogue, I suppose the dialogue's at its best in this film. It's very punchy. And this film overall, I'd say, controversial or not, but I would say this film is probably on par with Mission Impossible 3. And so, yeah, pretty good film. Well paced, well shot, just a pretty good film. But again, nothing particularly, amazing. Hasn't set my expectations, or it hasn't redefined cinema or the spy genre or even the Mission Impossible franchise. So still waiting for that film, but still, pretty good film. Probably an out of 10, but yeah, on par with Mission Impossible 3, I think. So the next film, I think, is Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Now we get to Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, and I think one thing I've noticed in terms of my opinions that have developed over this sort of watch-a-thon of Mission Impossible is that Mission Impossible Rogue Nation is really, really good. I really like it, and it's just ever so slightly behind for me. Ghost Protocol is just ever so slightly worse, ever so slightly, and I like both a lot, but I just have I leaned slightly more to Ghost Protocol. But I also said that Ghost Protocol is about as good as Mission Impossible 3. So that's basically 3 Mission Impossible films now, which are, in my opinion, at this time of recording, about the same quality. And they're all really great films. Again, none of them are astounding, reinventing the wheel kind of movies. They're not like that at all, but they're not really supposed to be. And they're all really well-made movies, and in my opinion, they're all of basically the same quality. Anyway, with Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, it's the first Mission Impossible movie directed by Christopher McQuarrie, and he's got a nice sort of style. It's probably, I'd say, from a cinematography perspective, it is the best looking Mission Impossible film to date. And, again, like all the Mission Impossible movies so far, it's well paced, it's well shot, it's well acted. And I definitely say the cast here is at its strongest. And you've got Alec Baldwin, who I initially had some reservations about Alec Baldwin playing a pretty serious character, but he actually pulls it off quite well. I quite like Alec Baldwin as Hunley. And then Rebecca Ferguson, she's a great addition to the cast as well. A really good cast. So the cast, generally in Mission Impossible, I'm yet to watch a Mission Impossible film where I think, oh, that person really didn't pull their weight, their performance was terrible, their character wasn't very good. Like Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, Benji is very present in the story. Because in Mission Impossible 3, he didn't do anything, he was just, he did do stuff, but he was actually pivotal in Mission Impossible 3, but he was only in a few scenes. Since Ghost Protocol, he's been basically a main character. And thankfully, in this film, Luther is back properly. In the previous film, he was just in like a cameo right at the end. In this film, he appears at the beginning. He gets plenty of screen time, and it's great. And I think this is probably the best sort of Mission Impossible team that we've had today. We have Ethan Hunt, Benji Dunn, William Brandt, and Luther. It's just a great, team. And I think with Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, there's also a greater sense of connections between the movies now. This film references Ghost Protocol quite a bit. Not a ton. You could probably watch this having not seen a Mission Impossible before, and it would still probably make a bit of sense, but you probably would have to eventually catch up on Ghost Protocol to really see the bigger picture. Whilst the first 3 Mission Impossible movies are very standalone. They don't have anything to do with each other. And one thing is, I mentioned in the Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol bit that Léa Seydoux also played a character in Spectre. And I was just making the connection between the two spy franchises. Here, it's so, it's not a cast thing, it's a plot thing. And the fact of the matter is that Mission Impossible Rogue Nation has a very similar plot. Not identical, but a similar plot to Spectre. Both films came out in 2015, they were just a few months apart from each other. Mission Impossible Rogue Nation came out in July 2015, Spectre came out in October, and so I'm not going to say who copied who, or if there even was a copying. It might just be a coincidence. I really don't know. I'm not going to get into that kind of thing. But if you have seen both movies, you will know what I'm talking about. If you've seen one and not the other, then you won't know. But the fact is that the Syndicate is like Spectre. Sean Harris's character, Solomon Lane, he is basically Blofeld. Ethan Hunt, James Bond. There's all that kind of... It's kind of interesting, the Syndicate is sort of this secretive organisation that can that starts all these
sort of catastrophes and attacks and deaths of heads of government around the world, a bit like Spectre. That's what happens in Spectre. So I don't know exactly. It's just really interesting. I was watching the film and thinking, yeah, there's enough differences here to distinguish the two movies, but this is a really big similarity between the two things. And I'm pretty certain that the writing team are different, but for the two movies are different. So I just noticed that. Has anyone else noticed that? That Rogue Nation and Spectre are really plot-wise pretty similar. Not identical, again, not identical, but similar movies. Another thing is that, just putting it out there, Rogue Nation is a better movie than Spectre. But the overall outline of this secretive underground organisation around the world, causing these catastrophes and things and disasters for various political gain and stuff like that, and the governments, and there's like a mole, and it's similar. So yeah, again, if you've seen both films, you'll know exactly what I mean. But this film it's better than Spectre by quite a margin, I'd have to say. Spectre's not a very good film. This is a pretty good film. This film, I think, I haven't got any actual problems with this film necessarily. Maybe a slight issue I might have is that the final confrontation didn't have enough oomph to it. It didn't really feel like a final confrontation, but again, maybe there's more stuff going on in Mission Impossible Fallout. We'll see, or I'll see. But I liked the film. I thought it was entertaining. That's the crucial thing. It was entertaining. I also liked, there was a great motorbike chase with Tom Cruise. It was all very, I think clearly by this stage, bear in mind, there's now a 6-film series. This is the 5th one. There's clearly a formula that's developed. And I kind of think this is the first one, however, that kind of shakes up that format in the biggest way. Ethan Hunt goes to get his new mission briefing, and then it's like, a bit of a plot twist. He's gassed, and then he's, it's kind of like a whole on the run thing. And I can't really say at the moment which one's my favourite necessarily, because I just can't. I would definitely say my favourite is probably a tie between Mission Impossible 3, Ghost Protocol, and Rogue Nation, which is probably a bit unorthodox maybe, but I just think this series is, crucially, above all else, very consistent. And I kind of know what I'm going to expect with the series, which hopefully will change with Fallout, because it can't really go on like this much longer where I know what's going to happen, because then you lose the excitement for it. But we've got one more film to go, really. I was initially a little bit sort of disheartened to find out that Jeremy Renner wasn't in Mission Impossible Fallout, but the cast that we get not only is really, really good, but there's no need for William Brandt to be in Mission Impossible Fallout. I may have missed an explanation in the film somewhere about where his character is and what happened to him. There may be an explanation, there may not be an explanation. I don't know. But it doesn't matter, because the story... Honestly, I've been fairly positive about the Mission Impossible films so far. I've enjoyed all of them, but I haven't really regarded them as anything other than really good. Now, really good is obviously a compliment. If I made a film and I showed it to a select group of people and they all genuinely said the film I made was, quote, really good, unquote, then I'd be pretty happy. But honestly, Mission Impossible Fallout is incredible. It is so good. And it was frustrating, because in film criticism you get a lot of pretty good films, which people will incorrectly call very good, or one of the greatest, and really, those films aren't. I mean, they'll be well made, well shot, whatever, but they'll be missing something. And Mission Impossible Fallout is a film which can justifiably be called an amazing filmic experience. It is astonishing. It is, in case you haven't already guessed, my favourite Mission Impossible film so far. And I can't quite word it. I can't quite articulate why this film is so good. I enjoyed Ghost Protocol, I enjoyed Rogue Nation immensely, and I enjoyed Mission Impossible 3. Those are the ones I enjoyed the most. Not to suggest that the first two Mission Impossible films are bad or anything, but they just lack that special something. And they don't have much of a linkage to other films. From Ghost Protocol onwards, the films become more linked together. And it almost culminates with Mission Impossible Fallout. And I know that Mission Impossible Fallout is not the final Mission Impossible film. There are subsequent films planned in, I believe, 2021 and 2022. And I think they could possibly be 2-part movies, given how they're coming out back to back. But that's a different matter entirely. The fact of the matter is that Mission Impossible Fallout is almost in a league of its own. You could watch Ghost Protocol, you could watch Rogue Nation, they are also very good movies. And then you can watch Fallout, and Fallout in every single way is better. The action is better. The plot, that's one thing. The plots in Mission Impossible films I haven't considered to be exactly, Citizen Kane or anything like that. They're not amazing, they're pretty good, but the plot in Fallout is really good, and it's not just dumb action schlock, it's pretty intelligently written. I don't want to get into intricacies and plot specifics, but really, Fallout's plot is fantastic. For one thing, it doesn't make me think of another film, but that's besides the point. Fallout's plot is really, really good. The returning cast is fantastic. We have Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt, probably giving his strongest performance yet, and probably the shining star, the absolute, the golden whatever of the film, Henry Cavill as August Walker. He was brilliant, detestable, ridiculous. I thought he was brilliant. I knew nothing about this film before going into it. I knew with absolute confidence that August Walker was playing a bad person because, firstly, Walker doesn't exactly like Hunt from the beginning, but also they gave him a moustache. And he had a moustache, and he doesn't actually twirl the moustache at all, but you just know he is not a nice person. He's going to do evil stuff later, and he does, and he turns out to be a bad guy, a bad egg. Simon Pegg as Benji, really good. Just Sean Harris as Solomon Lane, really good. Alec Baldwin as Alan Hunley, he's really great. Actually, he gets killed, so that was a bit of a shock, actually. But this film was really, really good. Christopher McQuarrie returns to direct Mission Impossible Fallout, having directed Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, and he's the first Mission Impossible director to return. And this film actually is, from a directing perspective, better than the last one. There's this great helicopter sort of chase sequence towards the end, and it's so good. It's so good. And, by this stage in the franchise, you know that Tom Cruise does his own stunts, and it's going to be exciting, but this was the first Mission Impossible film where I was really on the edge of my seat. I genuinely did not know what was going to happen because, of course, this is the latest Mission Impossible film at time of recording, so I didn't actually know, really, who was going to survive and who was not going to survive. And I haven't actually got any real criticisms with the film at all. Again, maybe I was a bit annoyed to begin with. Oh, Jeremy Renner's not in the film, but who cares? Jeremy Renner's not in the film, so what? The film works brilliantly without him. You don't even think about William Brandt not being in the film. It's fantastic. It's kind of interesting. The Mission Impossible series is good. It's consistent, as I've said, but then you get to Fallout, like, wow, this is so good. This is, people have called it one of the greatest spy films of all time. Of all time. Not of the last 10 years, last 20 years, of all time. That is one heck of a statement. And watching Fallout, you're thinking, how on earth are they going to make a follow-up? Which is exactly what is, that you should be in, thinking how they're going to do it. I mean, there's a lot of pressure probably now on Christopher McQuarrie and his team to somehow create good follow-up movies, but they've got a good setup, and Mission Impossible Fallout, does it render the previous films pointless? Well, no, because it's heavily linked to, Rogue Nation and Ghost Protocol and Mission Impossible 3. Again, the first two are kind of irrelevant movies, really, but basically from Mission Impossible 3 onwards, they're gradually linked together, and Mission Impossible Fallout was amazing. I've said this so many times in just these last few minutes, but it was a really great way of, if again, watching the films in chronological order, Mission Impossible 1 looks so pedestrian, it looks so simplistic. It's built up to this amazing film, and what's interesting is how they conclude this film. Is it's obvious this isn't that we know there are more Mission Impossible films down the line, but it's obvious that this isn't. Suppose somehow Mission Impossible 7 and 8 were cancelled, and they just said, okay, Mission Impossible Fallout is actually the final Mission Impossible film. It wouldn't work, because Mission Impossible Fallout leaves stuff open for future. So I'm actually really interested to see what happens next. And before I watched Fallout, I was thinking, would I want to watch any more Mission Impossible? Would I want to go and see Mission Impossible 7, for instance, in the cinema? And obviously I hadn't seen Fallout at this stage, so I didn't know. But I was thinking, well, probably not. I probably would just watch the Mission Impossible films, think, oh, they were pretty good, and leave it at that. With Fallout, I am now really interested to see what happens. And Fallout was, yeah, really, really good. The performances were good. The cinematography was good. The plot was good. The musical score was good. Everything was really, really good. It wasn't just everything was good. Everything was really, really good. It was, yeah. I can't even think of a comparative film of any genre to compare it to. Maybe it's The Dark Knight of the spy genre. That'd be a pretty good comparison to make. Yeah, 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100. Really incredible. So, if you're still watching this video, and please let me know if Fallout is not your favourite Mission Impossible film, and let me know why. Anyway, so that concludes my Mission Impossible watch-a-thon, and I hope you've enjoyed watching it, and I suppose if you like this video, then why not subscribe if you wish, and leave a comment below. What's your favourite Mission Impossible film? What are your favourite other spy films in the general genre? And, thank you for watching.